Garment Depot. I'm
Time
telling
out.
you.
Time out. Time out.
Yeah,
That was a like $42 million joint
yeah,
venture. Okay.
$42 million joint venture. It was what's the old song? You got to cry sometime, man. It was just a beating of the project. Anything that could go wrong on that project went wrong. In my mind, that was my retirement project. In
Mhm.
my mind, I said, this project right here, when we finish this, I'm done.
I'm sitting
'Cause I had a
down.
nice little project, I had a nice little profit on that. And as I sat there, and then we sat through meetings, and they were like, we have profit erosion. I was like, oh. And it eroded to the negative. And then we had lawsuits.
I'm your host, Les Allen, entrepreneur, builder, and leader with 30 plus years of scars and success to prove it. I've been broke and blessed in boardrooms and courtrooms, and now I'm here to share lessons I've learned. Each week, we'll talk business, life, relationships, and how to build what really matters with raw lessons, real strategy, and the mindset to move forward. Let's get to work.
Today on the Rebuild, I'm sitting down with a man who knows what it means to pivot with purpose. From navigating the skies as a Special Operations Navigator in the United States Air Force to navigating multi-million-dollar projects in the construction industry, Greg Cody has built a life rooted in discipline, leadership, and vision. Greg is the president and CEO of GCC Enterprises, a Dallas-based construction management firm he founded in 2002. Under his leadership, GCC has delivered projects from $50,000 to more than $42 million, serving clients like AT&T, Parkland Healthcare, UT Southwestern, and the United States Army Corps Engineers. His work and leadership have earned him recognition as the SBA Small Business Person of the Year, MBE Construction Supplier of the Year, and one of the Dallas Business Journal's Minority Business Leaders. He is also a graduate of Goldman Sachs 10K Small Business Program, the Kellogg School of Management's Advanced Program for Minority Business Leaders, and the Veteran Institute for Procurement. Beyond business, Greg gives back through service on boards like the Dallas-Fort Worth Minority Business Development Council and the Regional Black Contractors Association. Greg is also a life member of Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated. And at home, he and his wife Carol are the proud parents of 5 adult children and 7 grandchildren. Please welcome to the Rebuild, a man who embodies resilience, reinvention, and results, Mr. Greg Cody. Greg, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you, Les, and thank you for that flattering introduction. I really appreciate that. And I miss you being here in the office with us.
Well, you know what? I miss being there with you. I learned a lot under your mentorship. And a part of this broadcast, why I'm doing it too, is I don't want to sit around and wait for somebody not to be here to give flowers. So a way for me to give flowers to some of the folks who have impacted my life is to have them as guests on this show. So that is one of the reasons I wanted to have you on the show. So thank you for everything you've done with me in the past, and are currently doing with me still with your words of wisdom via the telephone. So,
Appreciate it.
you spent 10 years as a Special Operations Navigator in the Air Force. What leadership or discipline lessons from that time still shape you and help you run your business today?
Well, as a special operations navigator, we were officers, a part of a crew of 11 people. We were in Jacksonville Naval Air Station one night, and we were unloading a plane. And this Navy guy pulls up and he says, "Hey, I came to pick up the crew." And we said, "Well, we're going to stay here with the enlisted guys and get the load done." And he goes, "Man, they don't do that in the Navy." I said, "But we're all part of a team."
Right.
I said, "I can go sit on the bus." I said, "But we can't leave until they're ready." I said, "So it makes sense for all of us to work on this and get this done." So really the spirit of teamwork, and you work with people that you may not really like or love. But,
Sure.
In the military, it's mission. So once you get that in your head, you always say what the mission is. And I don't know if you remember me saying it in some of the meetings and some of the conversations that we had. Even when we work at the VA, it's not the contracting officer that we work for, it's the veteran. So you have to look at who is your end customer. And once you have that in mind, it drives you to an end.
So understanding the mission will
Understanding
get
the
you
mission
will get you through to that mission and accomplish that mission.
and dedication to that mission.
Right, right.
That's the
Okay.
key.
That is the key, right. When you transition out of the military, what was the biggest challenge in rebuilding your professional identity in the civilian world?
The biggest thing was it wasn't as hard as I thought it was going to be. I mean, I
Okay.
actually, corporate America. I remember my first week on the job, and one of my friends was there. One of our frat brothers was there, and he's like, "Let's go to lunch." So we go to lunch, and I'm looking at my watch. It's like, man, we've been gone for an hour. He's like, "Man, don't worry about it." I'm like, "What?"
Mhm.
So I said, "Man, this is a lot less laid back than I thought it was going to be, because I thought corporate was going to be drive.
Right.
And I got there, I was like, man, this is pretty easy.
So
And then that was so corporate America to me. It was understanding the game at that point, the game of corporate America. So that was a big deal. But I always had good work ethic. So we're going to go back a little bit past the Air Force.
okay.
I started working when I was 11 years old.
Mm.
I was a farmhand, and I worked in tobacco.
Where you from again, Greg?
I'm from Reidsville, North Carolina.
Okay.
And I grew up on a tobacco farm. And my grandparents, on my mom's side, were actually sharecroppers. They sharecropped with this lady named Miss Mamie. So they had tobacco with her. We had our own tobacco. And my dad let me hire out when I was 11. So I had been working, I'm 62. I've been working 51 years. But I've always worked. So I guess that kind of tying that back into corporate America. I was like, this is easy because I've been working hard all my life.
Right.
And this is just a game, not a game, but it's not as intense as I thought it was going to be. Okay. It's more using your brain.
Right. Right.
So it was and understanding the game and understanding what your mission is again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you definitely have to have the right mindset. Exactly. When you get into the game. You can't think of it as easy. So when you came in, it sounds like when you came in, you were thinking it was going to be a little more difficult than it was. But your life preparation and your military preparation helped you get into this and say, you know what? I can deal with this. I can handle this.
Definitely. Oh yeah, definitely. And that and when I went for a job in corporate America, that was actually my conversation. I said, I'm a country boy, farm boy. I said, and you teach a farm boy how to fly a plane. I said, I can do whatever you need me to do.
Right. I
said, if I can do that, whatever you put in front of me, I can do. And they're like, really? I was like, hey, I can figure it out. So that was my jump off into corporate America. When I had my interviews, I was like, hey, look, man, I started out shucking tobacco at 11 years old. I said, and I've been flying planes. So what you got? You ain't got nothing that I ain't done before.
Right.
And in the military, I've been around the world a couple of times. So I been places, seen stuff. So a desk job is cake.
Right.
So
okay.
That was an interesting transition for me there.
How'd you get into the business world?
A friend of mine, we started a company when I was in the military. It was Tomco, Fred Thomas and Gregory Cody. So we started Tomco even before I got out of the military. And then life happened. I got out of the military. Tomco wasn't doing great at the time. So, I said, hey, Fred, you got it. And I moved to Texas. And then, tragedy struck Fred. He had some death of his wife. Mm-hmm. And then I said, well, hey, look, I can start helping you by consulting. And then I started doing that. And corporate America got really kind of crazy when Verizon became Verizon, because it used to be GTE in Bell Atlantic. So, I was working, and I started saying, hey, I'm working 12 hours a day over here. And I said, this is kind of different. I was complaining one day to my daughter. She happened to be home from Spelman. And she looked at me and she said, Dad, she said, you always told us we can do anything we want to do. She said, so why are you complaining? Why don't you start your business? I said, okay. So that was kind of what kicked me out of corporate America. So at that point in time, I was like, I ain't no corporate guy anymore. I changed my whole philosophy and started driving towards that. And God worked things out because they had a layoff. They had the big layoff at GTE or Verizon when they were giving the big package and everybody was jumping on it. So I was one of the first 100 people to go. I
You
was like,
sound
I'm
out.
ready. I had started putting all my paperwork in place and stuff like that. So when that happened, I was ready to go. But it was the conversation with my daughter, Alyssa, that really kind of pushed me over the edge. She was like, hey, you tell us. And you tell your kids stuff, and then they look at you and they go, why aren't you doing it? You telling me
Right.
this, or you just saying stuff? So when she said that, I said, okay. And another important thing, and I do not want to leave this out. Um, I have been the recipient of the favor of God, and I always want to say that. My wife has been very supportive, but God has been tremendous in this, and I always thank Him for allowing me. I don't look at my company as a company. I look at my company as a vehicle to help the people that work for me, so they
Right.
can put their kids through school, so they can have food on their table. My job is to make sure they have what they need, and God has blessed me. So I always like to say, I'm trying to bless somebody else.
Right.
So it's a blessing to have this, but it ain't easy. It's not easy doing this. And some days you feel it in your spirit.
Woo.
You feel it in your spirit. And,
Right.
and that's one of those deals where God will touch your spirit and say, hey, just hold on. It might not be over tomorrow morning when you wake up, but eventually I'm gonna get you out of this.
Right. That
It might not
sun,
look like you thought it was gonna look, but I'm gonna get you out of this.
that sun's gonna rise.
It's gonna come up.
Yeah.
It's like when you're online, sun gonna come up the next day.
Yeah, it's gonna come up.
It might not seem like it at the moment.
It ain't quick as you want it to.
Yep. But the sun gonna come up the next day.
Right.
Yep.
Right. No, that's powerful. Thank you for
Yep.
sharing that. You founded GCC in 2002, and you kind of touched on this with what your daughter presented to you that you presented to her. But was there anything beyond that that made you believe that you could step out and build your own firm, this company, GCC Enterprises? And also, while we're here, can you share what GCC stands for?
But they all tie together because GCC stands for Greg and Carol Cody. Because most people say Greg Cody Construction. That's what they think. But no, it's Greg and Carol. My wife's name is Carol. And I want to say the reason I felt comfortable stepping out there is because I had a tremendous support system. Because she was like, go for it. Let's do it. See what happens. She was very instrumental in helping in the early days. In the early days when we had like one little small office and, we were sitting in there together. And then, so it was her that kind of said, hey, if you're going to do it, let's do it. And she stood behind us. And, between her and the family and God's favor, GCC has been around for 23 years.
That is fantastic. Folks, I think really need to understand that when you choose your partner in life, that you really have to have the right partner to help you be successful in whatever you do. And your situation, your marriage has shown that to me as well over the years since I've known you, that from what you just shared, what you shared with me in the past, but also being in the office and Carol coming by, when she got off her job, she would come by the office. And I can imagine that the two of you were doing that back in the early days too, when she was working full time and you were just taking that package from the other company and started. I imagine that she was in the office with you when she got off work,
Yeah. Well, I started out, I was working upstairs.
Okay.
The first 6 months I was working upstairs and it was driving me crazy. And a friend of ours from church said, hey, I got a spot. Because, it goes back to my work ethic. I had to have somewhere to go. I had to have a task. So sitting around the house, I was kind of like, about like, oh, I can go cook. I can go do this. I can run an errand and
Focus.
and I was like lacking focus. Exactly. So, when he did that, I was like, man, I got to go to the office. I got a place to go. So I had a purpose, and when you got good work ethic, it's like, what's my purpose? Well, what are you going to do in the office? I don't know, but I'm waiting on the phone to ring. I'm going to go in here and wait for the phone to ring. So that's kind of what you do. I mean, like I said, I'm not the perfect husband, far from it. We all have our issues, but she's always hung in there and supported, the efforts here at GCC.
Yeah, that's great. GCC has managed projects ranging from $50,000 to $42 million. How do you mentally and operationally scale to handle projects of such different magnitudes?
The key there is to have a good team. I mean, it really is. You want to have people that you can put on a job and know that it's going to be taken care of. And that's the real thing. But it goes back to what I was saying earlier. If you take care of your folks, if they got to stay to 5 or 6 o'clock at night, they don't mind
Mm-hmm.
because they know. But you got to be genuine in your response to them. You have to be genuine in your understanding that it's a team. And if they understand that it's a team, then they say, oh, hey, he's sacrificing. He's in here late. He's driving a beat up old truck. So when times are bad, it's like, hey, he's suffering just like we are. He ain't come up in here with a big old brand new truck. He went out and bought a boat for his family. He's going at it just like we are. So that makes me feel better about the folks that are in the field because they see what we do. And they say, hey, if he's willing to miss a paycheck every now and then so we can get paid, that's my guy.
Right. Just leading by example.
Leading by example. Exactly.
And I think a lot of folks too that want to get into business don't understand that last comment you made is going to happen unless you're just unless you have a silver spoon or a gold spoon. There are some days when the employer will not be paid in order to pay his employees if you have the correct mindset.
Exactly.
And
Because you can't put yourself first.
Correct.
Because, when I sit in meetings and I go to meetings and people say, everybody's going around the room and people, I'm so-and-so, I'm the CEO and president of, and when they come to me and they go, hey, I'm Greg Cody with GCC Enterprises. That's it.
Yeah.
I'm the CEO, I'm with GCC, period. And then people go, And then people like, no, we go, man, why didn't you say something? I was like, I did. I said what I needed to say. That's what I need to say because that's what people need to know. And then people will come up to you after the meeting. I thought you were I am, but does it matter?
Right. No.
I'm just representing the team just like everybody else here.
I had another guest that mentioned something similar, and he talked about he took the triangle and inverted it, and that's what you just did as well. You put yourself at the bottom so that you can work and feed and take care of everybody else, make your lowest people the top people in your company. And I think that's very important too, as we're talking to not only people who want to get in business or who are in business, but also to young folks out there who see things on different social media platforms, but you can't succeed with the attitude that I am the end all be all of my organization.
Oh yeah. I got a tree that's probably about a block or two from here. And sometimes you have to go sit underneath that tree. I'll go out there in my truck, I'll roll down the window and I'll sit there because this ain't easy. I always tell people, hey, if it was easy, everybody be doing it.
Right.
And I used to have a friend of mine, we did work in New York together. And sometimes we'd say, man, sleeping under the bridge don't look bad today because it comes with responsibility.
Right.
And I think that's what this generation is missing. They see things that people are presenting to them and they're only showing them the best. And that's what I tell people. I said, hey, if you're in a hair commercial, you're going to have good hair. You're going to have nice, bouncy hair.
Right.
If you go on vacation and you had a good time, you don't tell people about the mosquitoes that ate you up when you were in, the DR. It was a great vacation, but you don't talk about the sunburn. You don't talk about the mosquitoes. You don't talk about a twist in my ankle. You don't talk about any of that. So you always talk about the good stuff. So I always caution these kids now, don't look at YouTube. Don't look at Instagram. Don't look at that and say, I can be a millionaire in a year because that guy said it. Now, he might be a millionaire and he might not. but he
Right.
didn't get to be a millionaire overnight. So if he's telling you that, unless he won the lottery, that's the only place I know where you can become a millionaire overnight.
Right.
But if you want to be an entrepreneur, you're gonna have to grind.
1000% correct. And there are no overnight sensations in the world
No,
of entrepreneurship.
no.
Because, like you said, it's a grind. People don't see and don't have an idea until you're in a situation when you're with somebody like us that you might get up at 3:30 in the morning to start your day, 4 o'clock, in order to fit in everything that has to happen. Simply, if you want to take care of your body and you're an early morning person, you might get up at 3:30, 4 o'clock, go to the gym so that then you can go to work and
Yeah,
still, as the owner, be there before anybody else gets to the office because there's some things that still need to be handled by the rest of your team. Be there, present yourself as, who you are, rah rah, happy, cheerful, no matter what's going on behind the scenes.
yeah. Because you
And
have to work that out yourself before you get to the office.
right,
I mean, you
because
have to work that out yourself. For the audience, like there's a back way into our office, and Les was in the office, the only office between the back way and my office. And some days I'd walk in and Les would be looking at me like, "Dog, you gonna be all right?" I'm like, "Man, it's a rough one."
Mm.
So some days, you know, it's not gonna be I'm the CEO and it's great. Some days it's like I'm the CEO and I'm the whipping boy. Because
Yes.
when it comes time, especially in construction, if something goes wrong, they might not know your name, but if something goes wrong, they remember your number.
Yes. And use it often and frequently as needed, as they
And we'll
believe
call
needed.
you and tell you you need to be here. Like I got a call from Fort Hood one day. It was about 4 o'clock. Contracting officer said, "You need to be here tomorrow morning." I don't want to hear no excuses. 9 o'clock. Yes, ma'am. So at 8:50, I was sitting outside her door. If you work hard, life is easy.
Mm,
If you work easy, life is hard.
right.
Life is real hard. If you take the easy route every time, when you get to be our age, you find out living easy makes for a hard life. But if you
Yes.
work hard, it makes for an easy life.
Right. That is, and no matter what you do, if you're an hourly worker at the grocery store, if you work hard and stick to it, you still will have an opportunity to relax later in life.
Well,
That's the goal.
I mean, put it down where they're looking at. They're looking at these rap artists and stuff like that. Same with them. I mean, if you look at a rap artist, he didn't just get on the main stage. He went and played some trashy clubs. He was selling CDs. Well, I'm dating myself, out of his trunk. Or now it's Instagram. But
Right.
he didn't become an overnight success. He had to hustle. So you look
Right.
at these folks that you say, hey, they're making all this money. Instagram, rappers, they talk about entertainers and especially athletes. And these guys put in a lot of
Hours.
work that people don't see. I mean,
Yes.
time after time, day after day. And you go, oh, they're making all this money, but they put in the time.
I just thought of a question that I think is important. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. And that is, I was watching a show or something to that effect, or reading something, and it talked about winning is boring, and what you put into winning is boring. If you think about athletes, the consistency of what they do, their life is boring because they get up every day at 5 or 6 or whatever time, they go to the gym,
Yep.
they work out, they eat the same meal over and over and over. So they might have for breakfast an egg, some bacon, whatever they eat, go back, study, take a nap, come back in the afternoon, do practice again, eat dinner or lunch or whatever, but it's redundant and it's boring to us looking in. When the Patriots were winning all the championships, they were the boring team. When San Antonio was winning all the championships, they were the boring team. They weren't out flashy and doing all this stuff. They were just doing the consistent plays over and over. So is there anything that you can that comes to your mind in business and what you've seen that you can compare to the two or relate, or am I just, is it kind of out of the?
No, it's the exact same. And what you say, which is what is boring, is you need to always learn, and that's boring. I mean, that really is. If because I did a study not too long ago. You would be surprised how many people have read a book since they have graduated from high school.
Wow.
The number is extremely low. People go, hey, well, I got my whatever, and I'm moving on. But just like the athlete does what he does, if you don't read and keep your mind sharp, then as an entrepreneur, you're losing.
So you have to use that brain, the muscle of the brain.
The muscle of the brain, you gotta work that. And one of the things that you need to read is the Bible.
Yes.
Because it's so easy to listen to what somebody tells you and you take it for granted. My dad told me a long time ago, can't nobody save you but yourself. And you save yourself through relationship. And your relationship comes with understanding who you have a relationship with. You understand that relationship by reading the word. So that's a good book to read. But you also need to read business books. And especially in your field, you need to read what laws are affecting you. So when you have a conversation, when you are the CEO, and when you do go in that office, and when you sit there, you need to know what's going on.
Right.
You don't need to be sitting there talking about, I don't really know. And if you don't know, write it down.
Right. And that
by
goes
the next morning, you need to have an answer, if not for them, for yourself.
And if you don't know too, it kind of goes back to one of the earlier points you made, is you better have a damn good team around you.
Exactly.
So that whatever you don't know, you can get somebody who does know, and then as they share it, then you can learn it at a different level or a different speed, so that eventually you will know it too. Because as an entrepreneur, you have to know your business and everything around you. But if there's something that you don't know initially, go ahead and get that subject matter expert or partner or counsel where you can get that from.
Exactly. I never knew as much about concrete until we had a job that went bad. You remember the Red River job?
Yes.
I know everything about concrete now.
Right.
Because it was a big deal. So at some point in time, you go, man, hey, I got to figure this out. So you'll be put in situations that you need to learn, but it's good to have somebody, because we had Ron on the team. So Ron I got to that point. Somebody on the team knew. So when we got questioned and hammered, I was like, hey, Ron, what's the answer? And he was like, oh yeah, blah, blah, blah. But it kind of pimped me into saying, I need to know more. So right. it made me study a little bit more. Not that the questions would come to me, but as I'm sitting in a conversation, you need to know what's going on. And for these young folks, you don't want to be sitting in a room of people and everybody knows what's going on and you don't.
Right. That, I tell you what,
that's a bad feeling.
That's a terrible feeling.
Bad feeling, because you're sitting there like, and you're the only person that know you don't know.
Right.
So ain't nobody trying to make you feel bad, but you're like, man, I don't know none of this stuff.
Right.
And this is my job.
Right. So that should motivate. That should motivate.
Yeah. That should motivate you. I'm looking at your picture. You got books behind you. Right. I got 3 or 4 shelves of books. And it's not, I don't have books because I just have books. I always tell people, I say, if you buy a book for $20, something in that book is going to save you $1,000.
Yes, sir.
The book might be boring as crap, but that one thing, that $20 you spent, is going to multiply itself, because now you got a knowledge that you didn't have before. Right. And that's why I tell people, hey, my dad used to tell me, it's in a book. You just got to find the book.
Right.
And my dad grew up doing the Dewey Decimal System, not the Google search system.
Right.
So now you have no excuse not to know something.
Right. So argument is done.
Argument is done. But those were the days when you had banter.
Right.
And I don't think kids now understand how to interact with somebody, how to disagree with somebody and not be disagreeable.
Right.
And that's important. You need to be able to express yourself, especially as a Black man. You really do need to express yourself in a very positive way, because the stereotypes are so bad. So your response needs to be polished, and you can be to the point. You ain't gotta be step and fetch it to have a good opinion.
Right.
But if you know, then you're not step and fetch it. You're speaking from a point of strength, because now you're saying, I know what I'm talking about. Entrepreneurship, it's a journey.
1000% true. So again, another follow-up question that just came to mind because of that last statement that you made. And I think it's important for our younger folk out there to understand that you grew up in rural North Carolina. I grew up in Michigan. It was in the city, but it wasn't like Detroit or anything. We call it code shifting. And I think it's important that the younger generation need to understand that, yes, we are who we are and we speak how we speak, but there's a time and place for everything. And we can be amongst friends and speak our language, because we have English as a second language in our houses too. But when we get at the board meeting, when we get to in front of a group to make a presentation, or when we're talking to a potential client, you have to understand that, yes, now we have to shift gear.
Exactly.
And change into and utilize the business language. And is there anything that comes to mind with you that you would like to share along those lines?
We call it code sharing, but it's just understanding the crowd that you're in. And that's important, because you and I share a fraternal bond. And my wife, when I see the bros, she'd be like, do you really have to do this? Because we, as the bros, we get outrageous, especially if it's somebody we haven't seen in a long time.
Yes.
So when you just talk about code sharing, that's a whole different language. That's a whole different language. You see a bro you ain't seen in 10 years, dog, what's up? Ah! She'd be like, calm down. I mean, even at 60, I'm still doing that because that's our code. So when you say that, so even within our society, we have codes.
Right.
Because when you see a bro you ain't seen in a while, that's a whole different deal.
Right. And then like you see him before, and then I'm going to add, you see him before walking into a meeting. Then when you get in the meeting, it's like.
Yep. And you see him in the meeting, be like, because, Simeon and I do that. Because Simeon is a bro.
Right.
And we do business projects together, Simeon and Milton. We don't do that.
Right. In the meetings.
Right. What's up? How you doing? What's up? What's up, dog? That might be the most that we give each other in that setting. But we sitting there talking about, because we're on a $1.2 billion job now with them. So, we don't go in there, but, it's like, hey, how you doing? It's a time and place for everything. And to your point, you just have to understand. But if you have knowledge, it always goes back to knowledge.
What's one project that tested you and your team the most? And what did you learn coming out of it?
Red River Army Depot.
Time out. That was a $42 million joint venture?
Yeah. $42 million joint venture. It was, what's the whole song? You got to cross sometime? Man, it's in Texarkana, which is about 3.5 hours. No, it's about 5 hours from here. 3.5.
4 hours.
Yeah, it's a ways.
Right.
So I used to go out there and I would spend time out there, and it was just a beating of the project. It rained. Everything that could go wrong went wrong. The roofers drove across. They took the buggies across the top of the roof and gouged it out. Anything that could go wrong on that project went wrong. And that was one of those deals. And I think it was very humbling, because honestly, in my mind, that was my retirement project. In my mind, I said, this project right here, when we finish this, I'm done.
I'm sitting down.
A nice little project, a nice little profit on that. And as I sat there, and then we sat through meetings, and they were like, we have profit erosion. I was like, and it eroded to the negative. And then we had lawsuits. So that was the hardest project. But the thing that I took away from there was two things, and they're very cliche. Don't count your chickens before they hatch, and always be prepared.
Yes.
And I was like, man, I've got this. We got this. Man. I'm telling Carol, hey, we getting ready to start living. Man, that project beat me down. God will humble you. And that was a humbling experience because once we got through with that, it messed up our bonding. And bonding, for those out there, it's credit, it's business credit. You're giving somebody a credit card on a job saying, I'm going to do this job. And if I don't do this job, then here's my credit card. And you can hire somebody else with my credit card to do this.
No matter what the cost.
No matter what the cost. So we all know that if you don't have good credit, you can't get a credit card. So that messed us up for a while. I mean, really, we were in bad shape for a while. And, just God's favor got us out because, a lot of people are in the 8A program and they do their 9 years. And after that, they're done. We finished 8A in 2014. So we've been in business 11 years after getting out of the 8A program. So we have been successful just longer than we were in the program. And a lot of people can't say that. They don't take advantage of God's favor. Let me put it that way. Because they're so much into themselves. Mm-hmm. And they don't say, hey, this is going to come to an end. I got to be ready. And that goes back to like the farm boy in me. You got to be ready because when you go out there, we used to get home from school and my dad would be like, hey, y'all got to chop that field of tobacco next to the house. So you've been at school all day. You get home, you change clothes, and you got to go out and chop tobacco. And the thing is, you see it and you're like, but I have to do this because this is how I'm getting my school clothes. Mm-hmm. The money from the tobacco, we use that. That was our school clothes money.
And you wanted to be sharp when you went to school.
So if you want something, you had to work. And you think about it, you're like, man, I don't want to go ahead and do this. Well, number one, you don't have a choice.
Right.
I was going to say, they didn't really give you a choice. You didn't have a choice.
I was going to say, did you think to tell your dad no at any point in your life?
Never.
Wait, you didn't think it? Not.
I thought it plenty of times. I mean, I thought, especially, because, in a farming, you're up every day for 35 o'clock.
Right.
I'll never forget one day, my dad taught me a lesson. I went out and stayed out all night. I don't know what I was thinking about. And we pulled up in the driveway. My grandfather was sitting in the driveway. He had about 3 or 4 guys on the truck. They were getting ready to go to the field. I got my happy butt out my boy's car and I was walking the house. My dad said, where do you think you're going? I said, man, I'm tired. I've been up all night. He said, go change your clothes, get your ass on that truck. He said, if you can stay out all night, you're going to work the next day.
Right.
And that was a lesson I learned. I was like, there was no punishment.
Nope. Just do what you got to do.
He was like, hey, I'm letting you know, if you're going to do that, you're going to do this.
Right. If you got enough energy for that.
Yeah, because I was like, I'm going to bed. In my mind, I'm like, I'm going to bed. He was like, now you going to go in there, you're going to change clothes, you're going to get your ass in the back of that truck. And that's exactly what I did.
Right.
And I worked the whole day. And my grandfather did not give me a break because I'd been out all night.
Yeah. No, it's never. I did the same thing. When I was coming up, I'm like 4 years younger than you. We used to do the midnight movies. And go to the midnight movies on Saturday night. Now, mind you, I'm driving to the movie, so I'm at least 16, 17, 18. This is before college. So 16, 17. And in our house, church on Sunday morning.
Oh, yeah.
Irregardless of what you choose to do the previous night. So I get up, we go to the midnight movies. The movie started at midnight, it's 2 hours. That's 2 o'clock, it's over with. Then you hang out, go to the after hours spot or the hamburger spot that's open late. You might pull in, like you said, I pulled in about 3:30, 4 o'clock. I pull in the driveway, my grandmother sitting, your grandfather on the porch, my grandmother sitting in the window, looking out.
Peeking out the window, as they say, peeking out the window.
I lay my head down. It was just like 7:30. Get up. Yep. We got church. We gotta go to Sunday school. We got church, and we got to do this before we go to church. I'm like, Ma, I ain't getting it. She said, I don't care. You made that decision. But you knew what your obligation was on Sunday morning.
Yeah.
So we grew up in different times.
Yeah. And I think we, you touched on it earlier. We try to make it easier for our kids, but as we're sitting here talking about things, and as you talk about things, those butt burns, those yellings, those beatings, whatever it was that we don't do now, shaped you to who you are.
Right.
And now when you think back on it, you're like, I should have did that, because you might not, at the time I did not like my father for some of the stuff that he used to do.
Right.
But I heard somebody say, and I tell my kids this all the time, I'm not your friend.
Right. I ain't trying to be your friend.
God did not put me here to be your friend.
Right.
I'm your father. And if a friendship develops out of this, that's great.
Right.
But that's not what I'm here for. And I just see too many of these young folks, they're friends with their kids.
Right.
Oh yeah, you laugh and talk, and and I'm at the age where it's like sometimes it's like they be drinking with their kids. I don't know what you're doing. These your kids.
Right.
They ain't your partners.
Right.
So I think that in order to help them, we kind of hamstrung them, because they don't understand that sometimes you just got to do it.
Right.
Because my grandfather used to have a saying. He's like, I don't care how long you look at it, it's going to get done today. He's like, you can sit there and look at it all day, but it's going to get done.
Right.
So basically he's saying, you can do it now.
You can do it later.
You can take all day. And on a farm, you want to do everything early. Because by 11, 12 o'clock, when the sun's up, you don't want to be out there in the field.
Right.
So he say, it's going to get done. You figure out. So that was one of those deals. He was like, I can lollygag around, or I can just go ahead and get this work done.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm done. I'm finished. And that was part. His saying was, it ain't going to get done looking at it. That's what he used to say. It ain't going to get done looking at it.
Right.
It's going to get done today. That was his saying. And he'd be like, shit, let me go ahead and do this.
And he really meant it too.
And he meant it. You ain't going home. You ain't going to take, you go over there and take a nap. You can sleep under that tree. Do whatever you want to do. But before you get out this field, before you go back to your house, this going to get done.
It's going to get done. No choices.
And you going to do it.
Right.
We as parents, we'll do it for them. Screw it. I'm just going to do it because I'm tired of dealing with you.
Right.
You're like, no, I ain't going to do it. You going to do it.
Yeah.
You don't have a choice.
Right.
But I think we wanted to be spoiled. We wanted to see what it was like to get everything that we wanted. That was kind of like, because, everybody had a friend. Everybody had a friend that, he had the go-kart. He had the mini bike. He had BB gun. He had all the stuff. And you'd be like, man, I ain't got nothing. And I work hard. I'm out here busting my hump and I ain't get nothing. My kids ain't gonna have to suffer. Right. And that was a mistake.
Yeah.
Because suffering brings about self-awareness.
Right. And
you understand what you're willing to put up with and how much you can overcome.
Right.
When forced to.
Right. You served on numerous boards in Dallas. Why is it important for you to create a space for minority contractors and entrepreneurs at the table in your area in Dallas?
It's important because we pay taxes. I mean, it's our money that's being put to work. And to just go, well, I'll take the crumbs. That's not good enough. It's we need to be at the table. And, my goal is to always, by sitting on boards, you get a chance to hear stuff that you would normally not ever hear in your life.
Right.
So, and that's what I tell people, especially young folks, and, and I go back to that, and this is a little side, but, think about the Rotary, think about the Chamber, think about stuff that normally you wouldn't think about doing, but when you're in those meetings, they talk about stuff, and you be like, damn, I didn't even know that was happening.
Right.
Things go on in your world, and if you're on a board, then you understand more the big picture about what's happening around you. Mm-hmm. So I sit on boards to say, hey, to sit in there and be a representation for minorities and say, hey, what about us? We having this long conversation and y'all act like we don't even exist.
Right.
So, I serve on these boards to have a voice and to understand. So number one is kind of understanding for me to find out what's going on in the world around me, in my business world. But it's also to advocate for the folks that aren't there. And I always try to get guys to say, hey, look, get involved, do this. I used to tell you, you got to get involved. You got to go to these meetings. You got to, because if you miss something, they're going to tell you, oh, we talked about that.
Right.
You be like, when? 3 months ago. So now they done had 3 months to prepare. And now you're like, wow. Now we got to put this bid together. You didn't know anything about it. But if you was paying attention, you'd be like, okay, they're going to be doing this over here. Let me start seeing what that's going to look like.
Right.
And at least you can start planning on what you're going to do. But if you think that the world is going to come to you on an Instagram for all these young folks, it's not. Because the stuff that you get on Instagram, it's entertainment. Let's put it out there. It's entertainment sometimes. And most of the times, entertainment is entertainment that you really don't need.
Right.
Because what you feed yourself, back to what I was saying about reading, you got to read. Because, it's something about reading the book that's different from Audible. Because you have to take your time and you have to really get into it. And then you understand your imagination has to kick in. And that's what I tell people. If you're going to read a novel every month. Because sometimes you just don't want to read business stuff. Sometimes you want to read a novel because some of the things and places, and you have to get that vision in your mind to understand what's going on in the book. So it's exercise. Like I said, it's that muscle exercise. So, read a novel and be like, oh, okay. You're going to like the guy, he saved the world. And then you got to, in your mind, you're like, how in the hell did he do that? But you read it and you're trying to formulate and see how that would look to you. So reading a novel is good because it exercises your imagination part of your brain. Because now you're thinking outside the box. And then you read other stuff to exercise the functional part of your brain.
Yeah, that's so true. So we have, as entrepreneurs and as business people, we seem to be always focused on the financial, the planning and all that kind of stuff. But I try to, and I haven't done it yet this year, is try to read The Alchemist once a year, because that to me is like the best book for getting my mind imagining. And it still has little ties back to business and things like that, but it allows me to imagine and go to far off places. And
that's a great book because it actually, I don't even have a copy now. Every time I get a copy, I give it to somebody.
Right.
I'll be sitting down mentoring somebody and they'll say, hey, and I'll say, hey, read this book. And they're like, I don't want to read that. I said, because it's saying that you can actually, at any stage in your life, you can be satisfied. If that's really what you want to do. You think about the shop owner, the baker, everybody that he worked with, they were very satisfied at their station in life. But he had a greater drive.
Right.
So we're going to spoil the book for everybody.
No,
but it's one of the best books to kind of get your mind back into going, wow. And if you think about it, every time you read it, your imagination puts something different in, and you're like, wow, well, man, hey, maybe it was this.
Right.
What kind of crystals was he selling? What kind of, hey, maybe, so your mind, now all of a sudden you see different things. So you're exercising that muscle, even though you're reading the same thing. And I say that about the Bible because it depends on where you are in your life.
Different things.
You might read something 1 year, and 3 years from now, you might be going through something. And that means a whole lot of difference.
Yes,
because
sir.
Now you're like, wow, this is what it means.
Right.
This is what God is trying to tell me. So reading a book over and over again, there's nothing wrong with that. Alchemist is one of my favorite books. So I would say I'd say the Bible, Sid Harther, and The Alchemist. Those are good books to just kind of exercise your brain.
Right. Outside of the business learning.
Yeah.
So, okay. You and your wife, Carol, have built both a company and a family. How do you balance the demands of being a CEO with the responsibilities of being a husband, father, and grandfather?
Uh, well, now it's actually fun. It's a struggle, but it's one of those things that I try to not answer my phone after 5.
Mm.
I don't talk to people on weekends.
Mhm.
There are certain people, like if I have a job and there'll be one person that I know is like at the VA. My guy's Charles Ballard. Charles Ballard, if he calls me anytime, day or night, I answer because I know there's an issue. Because our understanding is everything gets worked out. And he said the same thing when we sat down. If it gets to my level, it's a problem.
Mhm.
And I said the same. I said, if it gets to my level, it's a problem. I said, so if I call you, we have a problem. We have been at the VA for 14 years. Mr. Ballard has called me 3 times.
Wow.
I have called him twice.
Wow. That's out there. That says a lot.
So sometimes you have to know, and those are the only calls I take. So if I have a job and I'm like, okay, Les Allen is the person that I'm going to have this understanding with, because we'll sit down and talk. If stuff goes left, you call me. Don't have somebody else call me. If it gets to your level, don't just call me, and then we'll work it from there.
Right.
And that usually works out pretty good. And that's one of the things that gives me an opportunity that I don't get caught up in a lot of stuff. I mean, I get CC'd on everybody's email, but people usually don't call me because I got a good team.
Right.
And when I get called, it's a problem. Like I told guys when we were doing Blue Roof, I said, if I got to go up on the roof, there's an issue. I said, if you call me and I got to go climb on somebody's house, there's a problem.
Right.
Then you don't want me to show up and have to climb on somebody's roof.
No, it's not going to be good.
You're like, okay, we got you.
If I got to go out and hammer a nail, it ain't going to be good for a lot of people.
It ain't going to be good for a lot of folks. It's getting ready to get ugly for everybody.
Yep, I get it.
Yeah. But that's how. And then, when you have kids and, you want to support them. And, as we were talking kind of on the side, my granddaughter, who is the apple of my eye, Isis, I would say that, didn't really cut her a lot of slack. She was close enough to me that she's like, man, that dude right there crazy. But everybody will tell you, that's Greg Cody right there.
Mm-hmm.
So, she's got the drive. She's a lot more beautiful than me and a lot more talented than me, but, pouring into her was really good. And in turn, she pours into her cousins. So I see that. She takes what I give her, what we give her, and she pours into her cousins. So that's how the grandparent thing works out. You put out good stuff and, you can take it or you can leave it,
Right.
And, hopefully they'll pick up tidbits, because if you think about it, things that happen to you and then something happened 20 years later and you'd be like, damn, that's what they were trying to tell.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So,
and he'd be like, damn, oh, okay. The light bulb goes off.
I get it now.
I get it because I'm in that situation.
Right.
Because I told somebody the other day, we were talking, they said, the old folks used to say, I said, hey, we the old folks.
That's right. That's us now.
Because when we were 20 and 30, people that were 50 and 60, they were old folks.
Yes.
We are 50 and 60.
Yes.
We're the old folks then. So I said, be careful on what you tell people. Be prayerful when you mentor people, because, that's one thing that, I pride myself on. When I have young contractors, young brothers, sisters that are trying to do something, Brother Cody, can you help me out? Can you mentor me? I will sit down with anybody and I will give you everything that I have. And I always tell them when they walk away, my parting shot is, I hope this helps. That's all I can tell you. I can give you everything I got, but I just hope it helps. I don't know if you're going to use it. I don't know what you're going to do with it, but I hope it helps you, because it's all I got. I can't give you something I don't have. But
Right.
I'm giving you what I know, and I hope it helps you along your journey.
That's the best we can do. You
It's
know,
the best.
be
And that's
truthful.
what you're doing here.
Yeah.
That's what you're doing through your podcast. You're saying, hey, I'm giving you nuggets of wisdom, pearls of wisdom.
Hmm.
Are you going to pick them up or not?
Right. So true. So I do want to just go back one sec. So what is your granddaughter Isis doing today, and what's going on?
Isis is now, she graduated from Florida A&M in 3 years with her undergrad, and then she graduated in 5 years with a master's degree in occupational therapy.
Okay.
She passed the test. She's certified. When she was there, she was a student athlete. She was the captain of the team 4 years. And out of the 4 years, they went to the championship every year and only lost once.
Wow.
She has 3 SWAC championship rings. When she was in high school, I said, hey, y'all aren't a good team. I said, but you're the leader.
Mm.
I said, so that's what you need to work on. Don't worry about making them superb athletes because they're not going to be that. I said, but your role on this team is to be the leader. I said, so you need to take that. That's what you need to do. And those are the skills that you need to work on. And it worked out because when she got the fam as a freshman, the coach made her the captain.
Wow. That's a lot. This is good. And did she have a project out now, you were saying too?
Yeah, and she has a book out. I left a copy of her book. But yes, she has a book out now. And
Okay.
it's affirmations for the student athlete. And it's for, and it talks about, isolation, impostership. She talks about all those things that, student athletes go through. It's long days, long nights on buses, for, the smaller schools, which, you and I are used to. It's the bus ride to DC. It's not like Auburn or North Carolina State or Wake Forest where they get on a plane and go.
Right.
The black schools, we got on a bus
Yeah.
and go. So, it's a lot of bus trips. And, she was a consummate leader on her team. And that's what the coach said when she left. He's like, we're really going to miss you because she was almost like kind of a mom to the team.
When you look back at your pivot from military officer to entrepreneur, what advice would you give someone standing at their crossroads right now, unsure of which direction to take?
Really think about what you want to do. Understand there's going to be sacrifice. It's not going to be an even walk across. It's not going to be. Once you make that decision, you're halfway across the bridge. And it takes just as much effort to get back into corporate America to the job that you had and make the money that you were making as it does to go ahead and go all the way across and be your own person.
Sure.
So once you make that decision for entrepreneurship, you're in the middle of the bridge because you've turned your back on corporate America.
Right.
So to turn around and say, hey, I was kidding, I want my job back. No. So when you're there at that halfway point, that's a decision. And it takes just as much effort to go all the way across as it does to go back.
And yes, so true. And my little analogy that I use, or the story that I use, is very similar. And that's, I can't remember where the story is from, but it talked about the captain of the boat. And he told all his guys to get off the boat. They got to the island and he sent somebody back, said, burn the boats. Yep. Burn the boats. And they said, sir, why are we burning the boats? Because we here now. We committed. This is it. We're here. So
we can always build another boat.
We can always, yes. But right now we need to focus on the mission at hand.
There you go.
Right here.
Then
we'll build a boat to get back. So,
there you go.
All right. Well, thanks, Greg. Just as we open with a few quick this or that questions, I want to close with a few as well. Okay. So same technique. So question number 1, what do you prefer to do? Call or text?
Call.
Work as part of a team or go solo?
Team.
Learn from a book or learn from doing?
Learn from doing.
Talker or listener?
Unfortunately, talker.
Build from scratch or buy established?
Buy established.
And the last question, Hampton or North Carolina A&T?
A&T all day long.